Hello everybody. Let me know if you can see me and hear me. I did have, when I first turned this on, my mic wasn't working for some reason, because there always has to be something, especially when my husband's not home to do the tech stuff. I apologize for being a little late. I had a viewer question last week about covering a topic, and once they asked it, I did want to cover that, and I wanted to cover it quickly because some of you are prepping to come to ReaperCon, but some of you may also be prepping to come to Gen Con, which I believe is next weekend. So you need, oh, Wendy's saying the same thing happened to Anne, so OBS must have pushed an update. I'm not sure it's OBS or like I have a wavelength that I use for the camera and the mic, and I think they did do an update, but the camera's fine, so who knows. Anyway, I wanted to cover this topic, which is about packing for conventions, particularly if you're going to be taking miniature or sculpting classes or open painting at an area, which you can do at ReaperCon. You can also do it at Adepticon. I don't know if they accommodate that at Gen Con, but there may be people doing it in their rooms who are having a little room party, stuff like that. So since it was time sensitive, I wanted to get to that today. As usual though, I like to do a little wrap up of what we've been talking about recently. So the past couple of weeks were, I was working on the zombies from the newly released zombie quick paint kit that Reaper has out. And I'm going to get back to those. So after we finish with some convention stuff, probably the week or two right before ReaperCon, when I'm like going crazy trying to prep and pack and stuff, I'll be doing those because that'll be a nice quiet topic for me, but I'll still be able to answer questions that you might have if you're prepping and packing. And then in June, there were several episodes where I painted a couple of snake men and then used one of them to show you the kind of critique you might receive from an instructor at a class at ReaperCon or Gen Con or after a painting contest, and then kind of edited or revised the other one to show you what it would look like to put some of those critique suggestions into practice. And the blog article for that is finally up. Well, at least part one is up. We talked about using the shadows to make the snake body look more three-dimensional and make the shield look more rounded and stuff. So you already know some of this, but as I was working on the article, I realized that that is like a really big, important topic for miniature painting, and I wanted to discuss it kind of on its own, not just related to that specific figure. Although I will certainly be using photos that I took of that figure and unpainted versions as an example. So I'm pulling Ron and checking my phone because I'm hoping to hear from Ron, because he told me I could do something, but I really want to double extra check before I do it. So, but it would be sort of cheesy anyway, so now it's definitely going to be cheesy, because what are these? I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you yet exactly why these look the way they do. But there's a little preview, and now I'll just take them away. We'll look at them more later if I get a text from Ron, and we'll look at how they came to be, because these are not really the product. These are something I used a product on. All right. I just had this out to remind you, be working on your entries, head out to my blog page. There's lots more than just that Snake Man article to try to get your feedback in advance. Oh, good. Bob and Julie are here because Bob and or Julie, I'm probably going to have some questions for them as we talk about how to pack for conventions and convention classes and stuff. I see that Valander is also here. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into that topic, and if I hear from Ron, we'll either take a brief break or circle back around. Today I'm going to be talking about supplies. So I'm not going to be talking about how to transport miniatures. We talked about that last year. If you weren't watching the show then, you can go to Reaper's YouTube channel. There's a Beyond the Kit playlist and look for episode 006. There's also an article on my blog that I hope Wendy will pop into the chat on the same topic that has links even to specific products for like carrying cases and other options you can use to carry miniatures. And I tried to address both the idea of like contest entries, figures you might be using to game with, large scale, small scale, a lot of different options for storing and transporting your miniatures. I see we also now have RoGR and Curse13 in chat. Thank you for joining us today. All right, so I made notes because I need notes, but I did not put them where it's going to look like where it looks like I'm looking at the camera. Maybe I'm just going to hold the notes and I'll look like I'm reading the news. A secret that I don't tell a lot of people. I actually studied to be a journalist. This was back when like journalistic integrity was a thing and whatnot. My main interest was actually I wanted to be an editor for magazine articles and stuff. I wasn't actually interested in like TV or radio news or whatever, or even newspaper news. But it was all kind of an umbrella thing at the school that I went to at the time. Okay, so my first tip is, just as I have made plenty of preparation for this stream, make a list. So I think most of us fall into one of two categories. You're either the overpacker, anxious traveler, preparer who's like constantly going through and revising and thinking about, well, do I need this? Do I need that? Do I need that? That is me. Or you might be the kind of person who, 2 hours before the plane leaves, you throw some crap in a bag and away you go. Either way, a list is going to help you. If you're the over-preparer, it will keep you from putting stuff in that you don't need. Or it may help keep you from doing that, at least. Valander says, yes, actually, not only back when journalism was a thing, but when magazines were a thing. So I guess it's good I didn't go that way, because then I wouldn't have a job right now. I do an actual, so I have a file that I keep on my computer. I print out an actual physical list, like for realsies. And I use this while I am packing. So let's take a look at the list example. So I do stuff like this. If I've packed something or it's not coming with me, I, scratch through it so I know I don't have to look at that anymore. While I'm working on the list and I'm doing kind of my initial packing stage and thinking about stuff, I'll put a question mark next to something. I'm like, do I need to bring that? And I'll put an arrow next to something that I definitely need to bring, but for whatever reason, I just can't grab it right now and pack it. And then I erase those as I'm getting finished. I do this in pencil. But the night before, anything that is going like in a separate container, like my miniatures that are going to go in their own carrying case, or something I'm using, I pack my own pillow. So I'm using that the night before I fly, so I have to remember to put that in my luggage. I'll circle it and then check this list in the morning and make sure I've packed everything. I am, like an anxious, nervous person about traveling. I'm fine once I'm on the plane. Like, I'm not afraid of planes or anything like that. I'm afraid of screwing up and forgetting something or getting there late or any of that stuff. So once I'm on the plane and I am no longer responsible for what happens, I just go to sleep and I don't care. But this helps take some of the stress off me when I do trips. And I just have a file and refer to that. So I'm going to be going through I'm not going to go through my list because my list is, it's all short form things because I know what I'm looking for. I just need a little reminder. But it'll go through kind of categories of things that you might want to put on your list. And for my patrons, when I write I'm going to write an article about like some of the supplies that I'm talking about and things you can use for brush holders, stuff like that. The stuff I'm going to show you today. But my patrons will get an extra bonus in that I will be making some list files and sharing that with them so that they have a starting point to make their own list. So I'm going to put the list away now because I've gone through and organized it in like a more organized way. Before I get to the list though, one thing I want to mention is there are going to be things that come up that aren't on your list. So what I call this the pre-pack bag. So I happen to have an old Reaper swag bag that I use for this. And I keep this in the room where I paint. And if I say to someone, oh, I have some extra static grass, I'll bring you some. I will put it in a baggie and put it in this bag because it's not on my regular list. So 2 months from now, when I'm actually packing for the event, I am not going to remember that I told that person that. In fact, even if it was 2 days ago, I'm not going to remember that I told that person that. And so as an example, I put... I drink a lot of tea, and the companies that I buy tea from will often send me samples of tea that I am not interested in. So I save these and I bring them to Bobby Jackson because he likes herbal teas and things with fruit in them and stuff, and I don't. And I will save the pretzels from my plane trip for Bob Rodolphe because he likes those, and I like to make him happy. So I have a couple of those brush cleaning things that I've been meaning to bring one of these to Michael Proctor, because I bought a 5-pack and I don't need a 5-pack. I've been meaning to bring one to Michael Proctor for like 3 years now, and I didn't put it in the bag, so it didn't happen. So I have something like that for like stuff I want to show friends or give to people. So stuff like that, that's not something you're going to normally think about. Either you have to put it on your list as soon as you think about it, or you have to have something like that where you just stuff it in your suitcase or a bag like that, and then you will actually remember it. Let's see. All right, workshops and classes. I know this is the biggest question people have, particularly if you haven't been to conventions before. What do you need to bring to classes? So most conventions are going to supply the basic stuff. So you're going to get like a water cup and water. You're going to get, at the very least, like a foam plate to put your paint on. You'll get paper towel. Increasingly, conventions are giving the supplies so that you can turn that foam plate into a wet palette, so you get a bit of extra paper towel. You can use your water, and then you get some parchment that you can put on top. But it will depend. I mean, conventions and events, local paint and take, or all kinds of painting events you might go to, they have cost and space constraints too. So they may only be able to give you like one little section of paper towel or something. If you know you like more, I use like an enormous amount of paper towel when I use paper towel. So I pack extra napkins and bring those just to make sure I have them. If you have a particular palette you like to use, you can pack that. But what you do need to bring for a painting class, for sure, is bring a brush you like. But also go back and check the description of the class that you signed up for and see if there's anything in the description where the instructor is saying, please bring this. They may specify a particular size or shape of brush or some other material that you need to bring that the convention can't supply and they can't supply. Oh, the convention usually supplies paint, or the instructor will supply paint as well. If they don't, hopefully that is also in the class description. Workshops are kind of a different beast. So a workshop is like someone from Europe, a big name painter from Europe, or sometimes in America, will set up somewhere for a weekend in a game store at somebody's home, and there will be like 8 to 12 people participating in the workshop. You usually get the figure that you're working on, but this person has traveled, so they haven't traveled a lot with them, and they're being hosted either by a game store or personal home, so those people don't have a lot of stuff to give you. So you usually need to bring everything, and I mean everything, like water cups, everything you need, sometimes even paint. But you should get very detailed information when you sign up for a workshop of all that stuff. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm just mentioning that if you're packing for a workshop, that is a slightly different thing. If you are traveling either to a workshop or classes, what if you can't bring everything? There are flight restrictions for what you can bring on planes. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but what if you're taking a class that wants you to bring that stuff? Or what if you're going to a workshop and like they have this like enormous list that would take you a bin, you'd have to fill a bin full of stuff before you could bring everything with you. So one thing you can do is work with friends. If you know anyone else going to the same event, split the list between you. Or if one of those friends is driving and you're flying, ask the driving friend if they're willing to put some extra stuff in their car for you to be able to use at the event. Also, for those of us who overpack, don't feel like you need to bring everything you might ever possibly use. People in our hobby are really friendly, and this is definitely true for ReaperCon. Something like Gen Con can be a little different because people are so spread out. But there is like a central hobby area where people are doing paint intake, and a lot of the people who are teaching classes are going to be hanging around that area when they're not teaching classes. But if you have some kind of emergency that you need a supply that you didn't expect to need, usually you can find someone who will help you out with that. And even if you come to ReaperCon and you flew and you weren't able to bring paints with you, you can probably find someone in the open painting area who would be happy to let you sit at their table and use some of their paints. Brushes are probably the supply, I would say, that would be hardest to get loaned to you. So there may be brushes in a convention classroom. They will probably not be in great shape. They'll be whatever got donated to the convention and for however long they think they're viable to use. You might get lucky and they're brand new brushes and they're great, but you might not. And I would say, given the expense of brushes or the fact that people have only brought a few, it's something that people are going to be more reluctant to loan to others, or that they need to use themselves for the activity, than a lot of other stuff, like if you need to share somebody's paint or something like that. So I will tell a few stories of that just to help you. Like every year at ReaperCon, someone needs super glue or someone needs this, and we'll just, go down the line and keep asking people until we find someone who has the thing. Even way back in the day, it was probably my third Gen Con, so I'd been taking some classes, but I didn't really know anyone in the miniature community that well. I had my first commissions that Jim from Dark Sword had asked me to paint something, and I brought the two items with me to the con, and I put them in the painting contest, and then after the results I picked them up and I was going to go over to the booth to give them to Jim because they were his now. But when I got one of them back, it was chipped, and I mean it was chipped down to the metal in a part, and it was not a small chip. So I'm like, well, obviously I can't give this to a client. It's not fully painted at the moment. So I was really kind of freaking out because I had not brought any paints with me. I'd been to previous Gen Cons and I knew that I didn't sit around painting outside of classes. But I was able to find Anne, who I kind of knew from having gone to a ReaperCon, and I was like, oh my God, do you have this red Reaper paint or anything like that? Because I have to fix this figure to give it to someone. So I might have even had to ask a few people to find Anne, but I was able to do it. I got the paint, I fixed the thing. And almost everyone who's been at a convention for more than a year or two has a story like that, where you've oh, I did not plan for this. Another one that it happens to be Gen Con, I guess because I just don't bring as much stuff there. I was entering a unit, and the year before, you didn't have to have a tray or anything for the unit. And that year they had changed the rules because it's tough for the contest staff to carry, 5 or 10 figures around that aren't attached to anything. So I found something in the vendor hall that was like a tray that had little slots for the kind of bases that I had, but it was just plain wood. And I'm like, well, I need to at least paint it black. Even if the tray isn't considered in your evaluation, I need at least paint it black so that these figures kind of have more of a frame. So I bought a black paint from somewhere. I grabbed one off Paint and Take, and someone had some kind of 2-inch brush, and I think I was using a paper towel or a sponge at first, and someone's like, oh my God, I have a brush, don't be insane. And I got that thing painted and put them in the contest, and I won second place. So we're a very helpful crowd of people, and we understand that, if you're flying, you shouldn't be flying with super glue. So of course not everyone is going to bring their own super glue, that kind of thing. Valander says, it is always a good idea to get this info from someone who has been to a given con before. I've never been and can't go this year, so I'd definitely be asking. Yes, it does help to, if there's a Facebook page, a forum, Discord group, Reaper has all of these things, of course. You can ask people who have been to the convention previously if there's anything you need to know about what is typically supplied for classes or other events that you might be participating in. Just bear in mind that the rules changed on me on that Gen Con contest. Things can change. Conventions are usually pretty similar every year, but it's there are still some people who don't think they need to bring paint to ReaperCon because ReaperCon will supply it. Well, back in the day when it was at the factory and it was a couple hundred people, yeah, we had a rack of paint that everybody could use. It's just not feasible with 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 people to supply paint in the open area for everyone to use. They don't even supply it for instructors anymore, I don't think, because then after a while the rack was just set aside for instructors to use if we forgot something or we needed something for a class. And I'm not even sure that it's available for that now because there's paint provided in each class, so you figure it out with the paint that is there or you bring what you need. So things will change. See, Trashorama says, if you get caught in a pinch with brushes, Reaper sables work really well in a pinch. Yeah, you can always try the vendor hall if you forgot something and it's something that you don't mind having another one of. So that is optional. Well, hey, Nomad Zeke. And Carrie Michael Cosby is subscribed with Prime for 25 months. Thank you, Carrie, for subscribing on my show. It's good to know that somebody will. I know I don't get the big subscriptions like with the shows with all the prizes and whatnot, but here we go. So that is that page. I already told you that people are least likely to want to share brushes. Air travel restrictions. If you don't want to check a bag, you are not going to be bringing very much with you. the 311 limit for liquids is going to include paints. So that means you get something just slightly bigger than a sandwich bag for all of your liquids and gels, which is your antiperspirant, your shampoo, whatever else you're bringing, plus paint. It's not very viable. So if you want to bring a lot of hobby supplies, plan to check a bag and plan for the expense of checking a bag. And particularly if you're not checking, you're trying to do carry-on, remember that you are not the person who decides what is permitted. Even if some website, even if the TSA website tells you that something's okay, if the agent who's inspecting your bag does not think it's okay, that's who gets to decide. I don't know if it's worth trying to make an argument to them that you looked on the website and it was okay, but I would say don't pack anything that's at all questionable, or don't pack it unless you're okay with somebody telling you you have to throw it out before you can get on the plane. If you want to check what kind of things are allowed or not allowed, do a Google search for, or search engine of your choice, TSA, what can I bring? They have a website. They list everything alphabetically, but you can also just put in a term and it will tell you about that item. Now, interestingly, I tried doing that with super glue, and I think I used the correct term as well, and it didn't come up. But it also very clearly says that flammable items are not permitted on the plane in checked or carry-on luggage. And super glue is flammable, plus also, I don't want to think about the disaster if it cracked open. Even if you put it in a baggie, because it gets hot. Like when there's a lot of super glue, it gets hot. I bet it would melt through a baggie, and then it's on all your stuff. And what a horrible nightmare that I don't even want to imagine. So I would never fly with super glue. Actually, Valander just said something that I probably wrote down, but I actually think I forgot. It's in the article. So he said, find a friend in Denton and FedEx your stuff to them. You don't even have to do that. You can ship yourself a package at the hotel. I have done this numerous times for Adepticon. I need to provide my own class handouts there, and I have very lengthy class handouts, so it's a pretty heavy amount of stuff. So I put that and anything else heavy that I can think of that I'd like, but it's not 100% essential if the package doesn't make it in time. And I send it priority post to the hotel, in my name, care of the hotel. And then you ask at the desk when you check in, and they have a room where they store that stuff, and they will give you your package. So I've done that multiple times, and I know other people who do that as well. I believe Michael's done it on occasion. When he does his basing classes, and he's got a lot of stuff he needs to bring for that. Speaking of flammable materials that are not allowed in carry-on or check luggage, that will include oil paint solvents. So oil paints kind of seem to be very hot in our community right now. People are using oil paint washes or just straight up painting with oil paints. The oil paints themselves are probably fine, and I mean probably in the sense that the oil paints themselves are fine, but will your TSA agent agree that they're fine? They're probably better to go in check luggage. But if you have pre-made oil paint washes, those include solvent. Solvent is not just turpentine. If they call it odorless mineral spirits, odorless thinner, all of those are highly flammable solvents that should not be on a plane. They're so flammable that oil painters actually recommend that you have a metal garbage can and you put your used paper towels in there just in case they spontaneously combust level of flammable. A lot of people don't do that. I'm actually, if I'm going to start oil painting regularly, I think it's worth the bother, and I am going to do that. So the paints themselves are fine, but TSA may not agree with that. Acrylic paints are water-based. If you do bring a few paints in your carry-on and you get asked about it, say the term water-based, and the TSA agent should be fine with it. If you really want to make sure, look for the MSDS for your paints from the manufacturer. You might have to contact someone like Katie at help@reaper.media.com. Some places post that, some companies post that information on their website, some don't, but they do understand that you may need it for purposes like this and can provide it to you. You can also, lots of us used to do this, I don't as much anymore, but it's even if you're putting everything in your check luggage, it's weird stuff. I mean, it's sharp implements and two-part putties, and we carry a bunch of stuff that probably looks weird if you're used to checking luggage of people going to the beach for vacation. So sometimes we would print out notes explaining that these are materials that I use in my job that I am taking to a professional conference, trying to make it sound like a normal thing that people do to just allay the fears of the TSA agent. Weirdly, my bag hasn't been checked in a few years now. It used to be like every time you would get that little paper in your bag that says your luggage has been checked. Valander is pointing out that alcohol inks are flammable too, which is true. Although I have brought isopropyl alcohol on the plane, and I thought we were allowed to now for sanitation purposes. Like I have a little spray bottle that I use to disinfect my phone and stuff when I'm traveling, because of all the germs and whatnot. But it does come in handy for a hobby use because it's also a great way to clean grease and stuff off miniatures. Of course, hobby tools like knives and a lot of sculpting tools, they're not going to be permitted in carry-on luggage either, so you need to check those or don't travel with them. I prefer to pack my most fragile or precious items in my carry-on, so that for me includes brushes and anything I've painted to a standard that I wouldn't want to do it again. So a class example mini, something like that I've just done for a game, I might be okay. I'm still going to bubble wrap it and put it in a hard case and whatever and put it in my check luggage. But anything I actually care about is going to go in my miniature case, or it's going to get bubble wrapped in a hard case in my backpack that I go onto the plane with. And my brushes, I'll talk about some solutions for how you carry them, also go with me because I bring sable brushes, I bring extras for people in class. It's hundreds of dollars if they got smashed up by a TSA agent who checked my bag and didn't put things back correctly. So to me, it's worth it for the little extra bother. All right, so now more of a specific listing and show and tell type stuff. So miniatures. Again, if you weren't watching last year and you're wondering, I'm talking about miniature cases and ways to pack your miniatures so that you can safely put them on the plane with you. Go to the Reaper YouTube channel. You're looking for episode 006. There is also an article on my blog that kind of lists stuff and links to products. I think it's called How to Transport Miniatures Safely. So I'm not covering miniature transportation at all because we already talked about that. Maybe next year I'll update it if there's new ideas. But so when thinking about miniatures that you would bring, anything you need for a game that you're playing. And if you just, have a pickup game, RPG game that you might be playing with friends and you want to toss a character in, that's something you could do too. Contest entries, of course. Any supplemental materials you need for your contest entries. So if you watched the Crow's Nest last week, Michael and Jason and I were talking about the MSP Open and how particularly for the open category within the MSP Open, you can include supplemental material with your entry. And we really love if you're doing extensive sculpting and conversion, if you show us at least the before pictures, but it's also pretty cool to see work in progress pictures. Sometimes people put stories that talk about the inspiration for this or how it's based on their favorite book. You are any supplemental material that you put out with your entry at the MSP Open and other open style shows is not just for the judges, it's also for viewers. So it's a nice way to communicate more about your process with people. If you want, it's completely optional. Although if you have an open entry, I would say please at least write on your entry card, chopped off the arm and replaced it with a different one, sculpted a hat, something like, just so we have some idea what you did, because we don't know every miniature in existence. We don't even know every Reaper miniature, and we do not have the time to attempt to go, okay, I think that was made by this company. Let's go to their website and see if we can find what it looked like before, what it looks like out of the box. So if we can't figure it out within a few minutes, you may not get credit for all the work you've done, particularly if you're really good at sculpting and converting, and we can't tell where you started and what you changed. Green Users and Bryce are both saying that was a great show. Thank you both for saying that. And Bryce agrees that pictures of conversions help so much. At historical shows, they call them brag books, he says. And I have seen some really cool things that people have included at some of the historical shows and ReaperCon as well. It's really fascinating when people have like the work in progress and you see their progress, or they're like really deep into a particular historical subject or mythological subject, and you get some bonus information about that along with the entry. It's pretty fun. I may also want to pack a few figures that I want feedback on. If I'm taking a class on a particular subject and I've tried painting that technique or effect before and I want to be able to ask the instructor about it, Or if I didn't get into that class, if you didn't get into a class, because I know that's always a problem, we can't give you the whole class again if you come up and talk to us, but we can certainly talk to you for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes about that subject. If you have a few specific questions, or there's just, you want like a really quick explanation, most of us are happy and able to do that. So if you weren't able to get into, say, a non-metallic metal class, and you have a few figures where you've tried it and you want to figure out, what could you do to make it better, bring some of those and come around and ask the people on Artist Alley for feedback. You don't only have to ask for feedback on things that you're submitting as contest entries. And like we talked about in last week's show, get your feedback in advance. A Bargy Cat has come in to say hello. I gave you your dinner already. It's in the kitchen. See, my husband isn't here, and I'm like, he's going to bug me because they expect to get fed at 4. Bryce is saying he hopes that I know he was joking about crying. He's a better painter because of feedback I got. Even if you weren't joking, I mean, that we've all had really down moments about how we've placed or the feedback we've gotten. And I think a lot of people who are good painters because we don't either ignore that or get too dejected by it. We give it some time, and then we go back and think about that comment and see if there is a grain of truth to it, or a line of inquiry we could pursue in our future studies. So I would not judge you even if you had really cried, but I am happy to know that I didn't actually make you cry. What else? If you are an instructor, bring some examples of the kind of figure, a technique or effect that you are talking about to show people in class if you can. Or I often bring more photos than I bring actual figures because there's only so much you can pack. But even if you aren't an official instructor, if you're someone who likes to sit and hang out in the open paint area, and you're going to you're really great at basing, or you've got like a water effects base or something like that, and you're going to get questions, like, feel free to bring a few examples. You've talked to people on the forums or the Discord, and they're like, hey, how did you do that? You think you're going to get those questions, or you want to be able to talk about it with people? Bring a few figures that show how you do that. So that's kind of miniatures. So now convention class supplies. So this is kind of what you need, unless, as I say, read your descriptions. Because sometimes people will ask for something very specific, and some events or venues may not provide as many things as others. But this is what I'm talking about, with the basic supplies, holds true for ReaperCon and Adepticon. I haven't been to Gen Con long enough. It's been so long, like it's been 8 years or 7 years. I wouldn't comment, but you should be able to contact people who have been there more recently. Lynn Stahl, I think, is one of the people who helps organize events there, so she should be able to answer questions. If that's Metalhead Minis, you should be able to find her easily on Facebook or other places like that. I think she has a YouTube channel as well, probably Instagram. We're all everywhere. So I want to bring some brushes I like to use if I can. Then any brushes that the instructor has asked you to bring. And if they're specific, sometimes they'll say it like a size 2 or a size 3, because you're going to be working on something larger. You're going to be using a technique where you're moving around more paint than you might usually do. Bring some of your own brushes just in case you need to size down or go back to your comfort level. But if you can, bring what the instructor has asked for. Like, I usually ask people, if I'm doing a technique that's at all precise, I say, I want you to bring a Kolinsky Sable, size 0 or 1. And I mean, like, for real. If you don't and you forget, I have loaners, but they're not great. But I want you to have the same, there are things you can't necessarily do if you don't have the same tools as the instructor. So if the instructor is telling you to have one of those tools, do it if you can. The one thing that is rarely supplied in classes is something to put your miniature on. I'd like to do it, but I fly to every convention now, and it's just not feasible to put, 12 or 14 of these in my luggage. So something you like to hold, even just a bottle cap off a soda bottle that's a cat trying to poke me in the butt. You have your dinner. Buddy, go look. Go look in the kitchen. He's such a doofus. That's his new nickname, is Doofus, but I mean it in a loving way. So bring a holder. These work well. They're very light. And the nice thing is, depending on the shape of your miniature, you can turn, so you detach it here. So you do it like this to paint. And then you turn it around and you put it in there, and it's like in a little force field. So those are handy. You will also need something to attach your miniature to the holder. And miniatures kind of come in two kinds. So you've got, and I have an example here. Let's switch to the other camera and look at an example. I'll move my boring notes to the side. So this guy is on a slotted style base. These work really well with poster tack. So you should be able to, just warm this up a little, stick that on there, stick them on there. Hi. You know what? I'm actually going to pause just for a minute and go show him that he has dinner. So I will be right back. Okay, I am back. It looks like he knew he had dinner. He just doesn't like that flavor. So that is too bad for him. I've closed the door now. So this poster tack stuff, I mean, I would test this at home when you buy a new kind. Let me see if I can find, I thought I kept the package of this. I think it's Loctite. Hold on. Yes, I think it's Loctite. Loctite Fun Tack. Wow, I think they're overselling that a little. I don't know if it's fun exactly. It's useful, but I'm not sure fun is the word I would use. I have been very impressed with this. And I had previously special ordered, discontinued poster tack. I ordered 4 packages of it from Amazon when I realized that's what I liked. But I tried this stuff, and it's even better. It is so good, it will often even work on the flat base style miniature. That is the other type of figure you will get. This isn't a slotted base, but because there's some variation in elevation, I guess. There's more for the stuff to stick to, so it works fine on that type of base as well. These flat ones, this stuff I think is probably good enough to work on that. But the other thing I like, if I had a metal figure with a flat base, I might not trust that. So the other thing I will use is mounting tape. So this is 3M's mounting tape, I think. I actually like Gorilla Glue's clear mounting tape even better. But what you can do, so it doesn't have the protector stuff on each side, and you probably don't want to carry this much with you. So one thing I've done is when I get down to the end, I just save that and I use it for conventions, and I'll just cut a piece off and stick extra on if I need to. But if you have your holders, you can also pre-prep them and just put that side on, and then don't peel the protected part off the other side of the sticky until you're attaching the miniature. So that cuts down on the amount of stuff you have to bring. But these are very handy. And if you're going to be open painting, also very handy. Let's see if I'm missing anything. Handy tack wouldn't fit. Well, I guess that might be true. But yes, so if you live in a country where they don't sell that, they sell something. And probably this time of year is a good time to look because it's back to school season, and the office supply stores and similar should have that kind of stuff for kids to go off to university and hang things on their dorm walls, because I'm sure they're not allowed to use tacks and whatnot. So there's all kinds of options for holders. Like I say, even if you just want to go buy like a 2-liter bottle of soda because you're someone who likes to drink soda, then just keep the cap and use that. So what else? And I do recommend those for classes because it does make working on your miniature so much easier, and then you're not going to be touching the wet paint. A notebook or paper. So Reaper often supplies these, but they go back and forth on whether the swag boxes are getting shipped in advance or whether you pick stuff up at the con. So I don't remember if we've been told how it's working this year, but if you get shipped in advance, you're gonna have to put this on your list and remember to bring it with you. They usually include a pen in the supply box as well, and I actually really like their pens. I mean, this one is from WeeperCon 2015, back when it was in April. And then they have these handy things where you can store like your class tickets and stuff. So interestingly, I had these when my grandparents died. I got left a big pile of stationery supplies and old cards and stuff, and they had these they're not genuine Moleskine, but they're like old school Moleskine notebooks. And I have only just filled all of these up to the point where I had to go buy another book. So this is like 15 years, and I could still squeeze a couple more classes in there, I guess. A couple more classes of notes. But you can see I've occasionally done samples of colors. I'm sure there's going to be a sketch in here because sometimes people will explain things in a visual way, and making a little sketch is helpful as well as taking notes. I find that I am one of those people that I am more likely to retain information if I write it down. So that is why I like taking notes. A lot of classes will give you a class handout, so you don't have to feel like you have to take notes if that's too much to keep track of on top of, trying to paint miniatures and listen to the instructor and all that kind of stuff. So different people learn in different ways, but I recommend a note just in case. Yeah, there was a discussion about painting an eye. So I drew what the person had been saying. I write down some web pages. If you make friends with people, then you have something to write email addresses in. This one must be old. 2013, yes. The first time I met James Wapple at CMON Expo in 2013, and I wrote down his blog, which is not active anymore because he does everything. He does so much. He's got a YouTube channel and streaming, Facebooks. He is always sharing great information with people. So these are these go in carry on too, because this is 18 years worth of knowledge. This is gold to me. It is not being risked in my check luggage in case, it ends up in Albuquerque and I never get it back. So the two other things that I would recommend, and I'm actually going to say highly recommend at this point, are a magnifier of some stripe. This is the Opti Sight. So it's made by the same company that makes Optivisor, and I do recommend that company's products specifically. After numerous purchases, I don't think my head is straight. Well, we're learning something today. Anyway, my head is not on straight, probably not news to anyone. So this style specifically, it's nice and light. It's got like a cushion / sweatband. I prefer this so much over the original Optivisor. Like, I have barely used my original Optivisor since I got this. If you wear glasses, you need something like this. There's also, you can get clip-on magnifiers and you can kind of flip them up, like the sunglasses. You may have to kind of look at a site that's for like low vision people or something like that. I don't think they typically market those to craftspeople, but they might. Donegan is the company that makes the Opta site, but this is on Amazon. That's where I got my two. I liked it so much that I have two so that they're in different strengths. You don't need to bring like the maximum strength level to a class, particularly if you don't usually use a magnifier. But the reason I'm saying bring it even if you don't usually use a magnifier is you are in a hotel or a convention center. The lighting is crap. Well, okay, it varies from indifferent to crap, but literally every class I teach, literally everyone, there is at least one person, and more often two or three, who are visibly, audibly frustrated with the light and don't practice during the class. I bring a lamp, so I'm usually, if it's only one person, or like one person is like really, really struggling and the other person who doesn't like it is at least trying, I share the lamp with the person who's really struggling. But I can't bring lamps for everyone, and most venues can't supply lamps for everyone. So this is an example of what I mean by a lamp. You want something, this is a bad example because you see I just turned it on by accident, and that will happen even in my luggage. But it's like an LED, you flip it up. I think it even has different strengths. Or it's either different strengths or different temperatures. So you can, have this while you're doing your work. I bring it not for me to work under, but to pass my class examples around with, so that even if the light is terrible, you'll be able to see the class examples. This one is USB chargeable. It does have, so this end isn't, this end isn't proprietary, although I think I have had one that the end was proprietary, but it's not a very common connector, because I was concerned that the cord wasn't working last night, and my husband and I were having trouble finding another one like that, and we have a lot of charging cords in our house. This is why it's not working, because that same cat that was just bugging me, when he was younger, he had a real thing about cords, especially apple cords. The more expensive the cord, the more delicious, apparently. You may also find battery lamps. I used to have a battery lamp. It didn't come home with me from one of the conventions. It does. Very rarely have I lost things at conventions, but it has happened. I've lost a couple of brushes, an optimizer, and one of these lamps. But I've been doing 2 to 4 conventions a year since 2004. So, if you space it out like that, and I'm an instructor and I'm running back and forth from rooms to rooms, and I might forget things. I'm not saying that all of this stuff got stolen by any stretch of the imagination. But, I mean, it is a thing that can happen. So either don't bring things you really, really care about, or keep a good eye on them. So I suspect most of these that you're going to find now are the chargeable kind like this, but I have had some where it took like 2 or 3 AAA batteries. So I would just bring extra batteries with me. This is nice because after a day, you can take it back to your hotel room and recharge it and be ready for the next day. I would keep the cord with it, even if it's not like an older connector or proprietary, in the event that you are able to recharge during the day. I would not bring a lamp that requires being plugged into electricity. You probably won't have access to it in an open painting area, and probably not even in a classroom. I did not know this until a few years back, but places like convention centers and hotels sometimes charge events for access to plugs. So the more plugs they have access to, the more expensive it is, and they're not going to want to do that. But there are also issues like it's a tripping hazard, or you're blocking a fire exit aisle, stuff like that. So just don't plan to plug anything in, because it's probably not going to happen. But I highly, highly recommend getting a lightweight little lamp like that, or a magnifier. Because you want to be able to see during your class and practice during your class, so that you can get your feedback when the person giving you the information is there and can see what you're doing. So to me, it is worth the slight extra weight and bulk to do that. So, and the last thing that I like never think about this, even when I'm taking classes. When you are done the class, you are going to have a figure that has fresh paint on it that is not very cured and durable yet. So you might want to bring like a little extra, a little piece of bubble wrap, some toilet paper, an extra piece of paper towel, and a small box if you aren't carrying your miniature case around with you, just to be able to put it in and then put it in your tote that you're carrying around the convention, and preserve the work that you did, so you can reference it and finish painting it later. All right, paints. I am not going to talk about which paints colors to bring this episode. I'm hoping to talk about that either next week or the week after. This is a question that I've avoided for years. If I could only buy 15 paints, which 15 paints should I have? You guys know me. I use 800 paints. I don't feel that I'm well qualified to answer this question. But I have been studying traditional art for 5 or 6 years now, and that is how people paint in traditional art. So I am now actually more qualified to answer that question, and I'm willing to give it a stab. But I felt like it was a topic of its own, because we're going to want to experiment with some mixing, and we'll test out some paints and figure out what the best answers within the Reaper line, or at least a few different options, because I'm not going to assume that you have, even if you're Reaper mega fans, that you have all of Reaper's paints, but how you would look through your paints to find the best options for what to bring for a small set. But just in terms of packing paint, make sure the lids are secured. Do I have a paint example here? Yes. So, we don't always twist them back on. So when I'm packing paints, I make sure that it's like that. And I also double bag them in a, so I have a Ziploc, and then I put that in another Ziploc. I also bring a few extra Ziplocs in case I buy more paint or something, you know, those Ziplocs break. I figure it's worth tossing a few extra Ziploc bags in my luggage. And it's come in handy not just on, you know, hobby trips. I've ended up using it on other kinds of trips too. If you think you might want to, that you're likely to buy figures there that you want to work on, and they're metal or resin, you're going to want some brush on primer. If you like using this or something like this, or you like to mix your washes with this, don't forget those when you're putting your paint list together, you know, your mediums and additives and prep and finishing type stuff. So throw those bottles into. Let's see, general painting supplies. So this is if you want to paint in the open area at ReaperCon or Adepticon, or you know, whatever other event you're going, like maybe you're packing stuff to go to your game store for paint day. I'm talking about a lot about conventions. All of this would apply to doing something like that, packing to go to paint club at your paint store. So what are some other painting supplies that you need? So palettes. Now I have to find someplace else to put this because the palettes are where I've been putting this. All right, so if you have a preferred palette, you know, go ahead and bring it. This is a pretty good one, even though it looks bulky. Part of the reason it looks bulky is because it's got this like hidden compartment that has something I can pack. Let's take that light down a little. Wow, that is bright. So it has something that I can pack to mix washes in. I can even use this as a brush stand if I want. Or I can take this out and with some modifications that we'll talk about, I could store my brushes in there. And then even the old, the Stay Wet, Masterson Stay Wet palettes, there's a bit of space in here. So you can, you know, shove a few other things in there if you need to. So you can store things within things to save a little space. So, of course, you're going to need your sponge or paper towel or whatever it is you hydrate your wet palette with if you want a wet palette. And then you need to bring whatever you use for palette papers, and you need to bring extra, you know, because you're probably going to paint more than that one time, or at least you're going to want the option of painting more than that one time. But you don't have to get this fancy. You don't have to bring your normal palette if it's too bulky or you don't want to risk losing it or whatever. There are other options. So this is just a plastic plate. It's conveniently square. All I need is to get some paper towel, wet it, put it in there, put my thing in. Or if I don't even want to use a wet palette, I can just, you know, use these parchment papers, throw them out, and then I still have a tray that I'm less likely to make a mess with. Or if you really want to travel light, just the parchment papers. You can paint just directly on this. So all you need is a few sheets of parchment paper and you can paint. So, but this is nice because it lets you have a wet palette too if you are someone who is used to having a wet palette. If you are used to someone who's working with a dry palette, either you'd have like the parchment paper like that, or maybe you use something like this. I used to bring these a lot for doing class demos because I like to use them to show people the consistency I mix for various things. Smallish Sam brought Tupperware and paper towel last year, and that will work great too. It's nice and light, and you're not going to be, you know, devastated if you lose it. So I showed the little thing that came with it. You can get other versions of those. This is the one that comes with the red grass palette. And this is also pretty light and convenient to have just to be able to mix washes and not, you know, if you are just working on a flat piece of paper or a wet palette, washes and glazes can be a real messy proposition, particularly if you're going to have to carry your palette somewhere else to dump out the water. So you're going to be unsteady and stuff's going to go everywhere. So these are handy to have, but there's, you know, a cheap throwaway option for that as well. And that is stuff like blister packs. So I bring these to my classes where I'm having people do washes or glazes so that they don't have to mess up their palettes. But I also always just have, at least, I probably wouldn't bring this whole stack, but I'd bring this many maybe with me in my general painting supplies so that if I'm painting and I want to make a wash or glaze and I don't want to worry about making a mess, I have an option. You can even use the bigger ones as palettes. I mean, I was doing my paint maintenance and doing those swatches on my bottles, but, I've painted out of these too. If I just want to do a quick touch up, or I'm like priming something, I'll often just use these so that I don't have to waste wet palette space on that kind of stuff, or I know that I put white primer somewhere else, so I'm not mixing it up with white paint on my palette. Oh, I had another one of these out. Another option is if you happen to take a medication where you get these things, keep a tray, pull off all this tin foil, and there's a whole bunch of little wash cups, or if you like to mix layers, there's something that you can bring to convention and not be sad that, if you lose it or throw it away or whatever. I mean, hopefully you will throw this away after using it. That's quite a lot of recycling and reuse. I think that's about as much as we can expect from that kind of product. So those are some palette options. We talked about handles, which you should bring for general painting, not just classes. Magnifiers and lamps are also very handy for general painting, not just classes. Pokey tool or a paper clip to unstick your bottles. So if you do use a Pokey tool, I did not... Oh, wait, I think I do have it. Hold on. I think I have an example of how I safely transport Pokey tools. Yep, there it is. So this is like the felt that you can get shapes or just rectangles of in the craft store. I actually use a gray piece of this and a black piece of this for my backdrops in my camera. I cannot remember. There was some project. There was a reason why I bought red, and I no longer remember what it is. But it's a handy way to like restrain these pins so that they aren't going to poke my other luggage. You can also get like corrugated cardboard and you shove these down in the middle, or tape them to something. I mean, there's a variety of options. If you don't want to travel with something sharp like that, just bring a paper clip or two, because you can, unfold these and use them to unclog dropper bottles. But you will be somebody's hero if you are the person who brings this. Well, I bring it because I try to include that in my teaching kit, because it's like, it's like how things don't happen unless you're unprepared for them. So bottles are going to clog. If you aren't prepared for bottles to clog and you're teaching in class, bottles are going to clog. So I bring it. Let's see, what else? I talked about how you would want some kind of little storage thing for miniatures that you paint in a class. If you're painting miniatures at an event, it's a similar thing. Include the fact that you might have more miniatures than you left the house with to come home with in how you're packing your miniatures plans. And it doesn't have to be, this is a good time of year to get them too. I like those hard plastic pencil cases. I saw some in Walgreens the other day. Weirdly, they seem to cost $5 now, where I'm used to buying them for $1, but we all know how that's going. But I love those. I just bubble wrap things, put them in there, and then use a rubber band on the outside just to make extra sure that it's not going to open. Unless it's like a resin miniature or something with fragile basing or something like that. But for like most bones and metals miniatures, unless the basing is complex, that method works fine. I will often bring some extra paper towels and napkins. It's handy if you make a mess, maybe while you're painting. But like I said, the event may have supplies running low, and maybe they've sent somebody else to get more paper towels. But if you want to keep on painting, you have a few napkins left over from lunch, just throw them in your backpack, and then you'll have them for painting purposes too. If you want to prep miniatures, so if you think you're likely to buy miniatures at the event and want to prep them, Hickory Nico $5.89, Smallish Sam. I'm other people who may have joined us since then. I am talking about how you would pack I'm talking about how you would pack for something like ReaperCon specifically, so for convention painting and sculpting classes and open painting, but it also applies to packing. What do you bring to a paint day at your local paint club, and some other things that you could be packing painting supplies for. And you'll be able to watch, if you come in the middle and you're interested in that topic, you'll be able to watch the video on demand as soon as this finishes streaming. And then I'll go up on the Reaper YouTube page, and I will also be writing a blog post where I'm going to include this actual, I wrote a list, and I'm going to go through some of the items on the list, and then the people who support me on Patreon, who really support you guys, because almost everything I do is publicly and freely available. So my patrons are people who are supporting the hobby as much as me, because they allow me to take time to spend more effort to do stuff like this. So every now and then I do a Patreon exclusive, and they're going to get the files of these lists so that they have a starting point to make their own lists if they wish. So if you want to prep miniatures, hobby knife and or scalpel, files, and sanding sticks are all useful tools depending on the material you're most likely to be prepping. So these are very typical hobby knife handles. I have noticed, I do not know why, almost all of these hobby knives seem to have these slip-on lids. And you can see it on this one. It's not very tight anymore. I think this one's newer, so it's still a tighter fit, but they eventually loosen up. I do not like this with a very sharp object. So if I'm bringing one like this, I mean, first of all, I'd try to get a plastic handle one because it's metal, so it's heavier, but I will tape this with Scotch tape. Or you can look for this, and for some reason this is harder to find than one might expect. They do make a retractable one. So this is X-Acto brand, and I think that's what they call it, a retractable knife. So if you take it out to the first slot, that's for use, and then you take it out to the second slot, that's to change the blade. And it's nice light plastic. I have no clue why this isn't more of a standard of how you make this thing, because it seems less fraught with potential injury than this approach, but there you go. So this is the X-Acto style blade, and this one is a Scalpel, which is what I prefer for prepping classic Bones and Bones Black, because it stays sharp longer. So I will often bring stuff like that because we don't know if Ron's going to ask us to paint miniatures, and then we would need to get the mold lines off the miniatures. But if you don't think you're going to buy miniatures, because the other thing I would do is, and I don't think I mentioned this, so I was on here, but I skipped it. If you do want to like open paint or practice some techniques that you're learning in classes, you can like prep your miniatures and have them ready to go before you even leave. So you just wrap them up and they're ready to paint. So you've taken off the mold lines or primed or whatever it is you like to do to prep your miniatures. You can do that at home. Oh, files and sanding sticks though. Diamond files are pretty small, particularly if you don't bring your whole set. Like I have a set of 12. I really only use 3 of them. And when I was searching for replacements, I ended up ordering several different ones. So I have this now as a little travel set. It's got the half round, the round, and the flat. I wish it had a crossing file. That's actually one of my favorite styles, but for travel purposes, I mean, this is all I need. And then sanding sticks. I don't think I have one in here. I have one somewhere though. There may be different kinds of these, but these are the kind I get. And these, if you use a light hand, these even work on original bendy bones. So you go in like one direction, and then if there's any like little bits that aren't super clean, you go even more lightly in the opposite direction and take it off. And we will return to what this is at a different topic. But again, if you're an overpacker, don't feel like you have to bring some of those things. Prep your miniatures in advance and don't worry about it. Just put the stuff you buy in your luggage and fix it up when you get home. I talked about how I like to have isopropyl alcohol to get the grease off miniatures, as well as for general sanitation purposes. Another item in the category of can be useful but not necessary are tweezers. If you find that your cat's hair is so tenacious that you bring it with you on vacation, like I do, this is nice to be able to pull fibers out of your paint job or hold things. Hold on, I gotta get my little cart out because I did not get an example of this out in advance. If you're more likely to be sculpting or holding small pieces, what you actually want for that are reverse tweezers. So these are ones that don't open until you grip them, because you can hold something with this, but you're gonna have to hold it closed the entire time you're, painting, sculpting, manipulating it. Where this, you just, you put it in the thing. There's different ones of this. This one is actually for like assembly more. Like you grab the tiny little part and then you put it on the other tiny little part. But I have some that are more like holder style for various tasks. I've used them for stuff like assembling little flower bouquets, where I'm taking like the flower from one type of dried flower and the leaf from another type of dried flower and gluing them together and stuff like that, which is not something I would do at conventions, granted. What else have we got? So now we're at the part where I hope that Bob and Julie will let me know if I have missed anything, because I don't do a lot of sculpting and conversion. I think I have some of the tools, but I may not have thought of, if I were going to do this at a convention, what would I bring with me? But here is what I did think of. So if your primary interest is painting, this is stuff you don't need to have, unless a class told you otherwise. But if you like sculpting and converting, and that's something you want to sit with people and study or that just do, then these are things you may want to bring with you. This may be more important to you than paint if that's your main interest. So epoxy putty, or I guess you could have, I'm not sure what the family of like the Fimo sculpty type puddle, is it resin putty? What bakeable putties, what those are called. Certainly you can bring those, but you're going to need some kind of containment system, because those stay malleable until they're baked, and you're probably not going to be able to bake it until you get home. Whereas the two-part epoxy putty cures as you go. Kuniko says, the cat hair is everywhere. I still find orange fluff from my cat that passed 5 years ago. Yeah, I feel like orange fluffy cats are especially adept at sharing their hair with us forever. I have a note on putties and glues. We talked about the plane restrictions. Those may be things that aren't going to be very welcome in your carry-on luggage, or may not even be allowed in check luggage. So two-part epoxy is fine. I don't know that I'd want to take it in my carry-on luggage. Maybe Bob and Julie can comment if they do. I wouldn't want the TSA agent to think I'm making a bomb or something. I have packed it in my check luggage, but there's a lot of glues that I wouldn't. So I'd try to have a friend that, could bring some super glue for me to use for doing conversions if I were doing that. A few of your favorite sculpting tools. I wouldn't feel like I had to bring everything, but you know which ones you like best. A wax 9 is a very common one, but if you have a particular tool that you like using a lot, unless a class has told you bring a wax 9, bring the one that you like. A working surface. So I'm not going to dig it out, but I have a little self-healing mat that's about this size. So that's something you could bring. I am going to dig this out. So a surface that putty doesn't stick to very much is useful for some techniques. Like you can roll stuff out to, hold on, I have a portable drawer thing down here and it's being very weird. You can roll things out and then pop them off once they cure. And certain kinds of plastic, make sure you've tested before you go, but this is milk carton, and the inside of the milk carton is very smooth. So it can work well for that purpose, and you can cut it up to be small and easily transportable. So that is a good option for, I probably was keeping these in case I want to make broken windows or something on a miniature. You know how it is if you've done this hobby for any longer than 5 seconds. You've kept a lot of weird stuff and you don't always remember why. You will also need hobby knives and scalpels. A dulled hobby knife is a pretty good tool for sculpting some kind of textures, as well as needing things to cut putty, or, you can cut off once it's cured, if it didn't work out exactly the way you wanted, you can cut it off or, trim it down if you put a little too much putty on the armature. So he's like a little too bulky. Green Users confirms that they do not take the putty or any sharp tools on the carry-on, and I would 100% agree with that. And I've never taken either of those things in my carry-on either. If you want to do conversions, then a pin vise so that you can chop things apart and then glue them back together is handy. Then you will need whatever you use for pins, whatever rods. I use paper clips, and I did not write it here, and I should write it. You're going to need whatever clippers you use to chop up your pins to make them the correct length for pinning your joins. Tweezers also come in handy for sculpting functions. I took a sculpting class where tweezers were part of the kit, and he showed us how to use them to make like a chain, like, link chains. Chain link, I guess would be a more correct term. Small texture stamps and tools. So I'm going to open that box that I was talking about. So this is, really it's kind of my at-home sculpting kit other than for specific tools, which I will show you an option for that in a minute. So this kind of is apart from my special tools. This is my whole sculpting kit. This is the tweezer that I was mentioning for doing chain links. So you got like a tube, and then you go down the tube and crimp in to make the links, and then you use something like this darning needle to poke the links that are facing up. And I have more darning needles that I think are probably from Bob and Julie. Green Users. Bakeable polymer clays are difficult at cons because there's no access to ovens. Yeah, you would need to just try and store it in something like this where you didn't touch it at all, and then take it home and bake it. So it would be chancy. But I know, and if you have a lot of sculptors have a very particular mix that they like. I think before Jason switched over to digital, he was mixing some Sculpey in with his green stuff. Or I know some people like to do a combination of green stuff and something called Procreate. So if you have something like that where you like a particular thing, get some ready in advance and bring it with you. Now, depending on the amount of sculpting you're doing, putty goes a long way. You probably only need something like this. Now, I need to take this out and refresh it because this is very, very old putty, and it has not been refrigerated. So this is probably not good putty, but that I have this as, kind of my little travel thing. I have a razor blade just in case it's a hobby thing. I'm sure that there was a reason I had this that I no longer remember. Maybe this was for holding the sticky putty. So there's more of those darning needles. There's backup scalpel blades. What else have we got? I've got a couple armatures. Okay, well that's not much of an armature anymore. I don't know what happened to that guy, but we can take that out. So I got a couple armatures if I was going to practice. The paper clips for pinning. These are called oilers, which is also a gift from Bob and Julie, if I'm remembering correctly. There's a little hole at the end, and you can, just gently tap this into putty to create, in fact, well, here we have that. Where's that blue putty on? I can do it on that. I always have that stuff around for once in a while. So you can create the shape of rivets with this. But even if you don't have this, if you have a mechanical pencil, you can still create the shape of rivets. It's just a particular size. Green Users says that Jason used Aves in green. We sometimes add the polymer clay to green, and you don't have to bake that if your percentage of the polymer clay isn't too high. Nomad Zeke asks whether you couldn't cure polymer clay in Texas in the summer by just putting a cookie sheet on the dashboard. I don't know. Bryce says if you put wires in your putty, which is called an armature, so people do put wires in their putty, you could create all sorts of excitement. Definitely don't put that in your carry-on, I'm going to say. Bryce needs some of the oilers. Where did I get them? I got them from Bob and Julie. Maybe they can comment in chat on where they got them. At least I think it was Bob and Julie. It was one of the sculptors. So these ones are all different size. I think, were they watchmaker things? Is that what, watchmaker supplies? So there's different kind of sizes of holes that you can get. But I mean, even if you all you can have access to is mechanical pencil, I mean, they make mechanical pencils as small as 0.3 millimeters. So you can get a 0.3, a 0.5, and 0.7 size holes, if nothing else. These go in to a particular kind of handle that I bet the tool with the handle is somewhere else, but they're different kinds of smoothing tools. So you may be able to find tools that have optional or heads. So you can bring the extra heads. A convertible handle like that would be handy for travel, but I don't know how common that is. These really don't do much other than smoothing or making little semicircle indentations. What else have we got in here? Toothbrush for texture. So a lot of what I'm going to do if I'm using sculpting stuff out of town is make bases. So I have bases and I have things that will make textures on bases. So I can make like rock or earthy textures with, ripped up cork. The side of it has a lot of texture, so you can press that into the putty. I've got some of this rock for a similar reason. This rock is, more if I want to poke in indentations and kind of make like a cliff overhang or something. I'm not even sure why I have that rock. Maybe it's a similar thing. Maybe I just put all rocks that I had in here. You know how to, sandpaper. You can make like a finer texture if you want to make like a sandy beach or a desert or something. This sandpaper seems like maybe I need another piece because I don't feel any texture. This one might still have a little more texture. So these things are light and easy to carry with you. It's just a question of whether you would use enough to be something like this. I do recommend because, you can put a hobby knife in here and if the lid comes off, it's probably still not going to pierce the side or whatever, because this is a decent thickness of plastic. I probably don't need this and the darning needles. I mean, I think those duplicate functions, but this, I believe, was part of a sculpting set I got in a class. So some sculpting classes, the instructor is going to provide loaner tools for you. I believe that's what Bob and Julie do. But I've also taken classes where like the class fee was fairly high, but you got a kit of stuff to take home with you. Green User says it has to reach 225 Fahrenheit to bake the polymer clays and is hoping that cars are not going to get that warm. It's Texas, Bob and Julie. Well, actually, you guys are in Arizona. If it doesn't get hot enough where you are, then you just can't cook stuff in a car. Bryce says Bombshell had some Oilers, but they were gone when I looked. I wonder if you could mail Bombshell and see if they plan on having more and if they plan on having any at the convention, because now that I've mentioned them, probably a bunch of people want to buy them. Green User says they're also called glue applicators. Smallish Sam, that sandpaper is almost as old as I am. Yes, I think I need a new piece of sandpaper, and I think I actually need a bigger grid for making textures. I'm not sure what I thought the sandpaper was doing, but I don't think it's going to make a very convincing desert landscape. I also threw some of the sanding sticks in here. And then these are handy tools, and I'll open up the other package that has like the nice sculpting tools, because I got them their own thing now. And part of the reason I'm showing this because we're gonna go right into brush storage, because there will be some crossover. So I think this is made by a company called Global Arts. And I think they do one that's just like one pocket, so you just open it like that. They've got this 2-pocket one, and they may have a bigger one as well. They're going to call them pencil cases. You will also find similar style pencil cases where they even have kind of individual size elastics. So with these, I do have to stick enough tools in to each slot I don't worry about the tools, but if I were using this for brushes, you would want to make sure that you can, turn it upside down and shake it and the brush heads aren't going to get all smushed up there, or that you can carry it in such a way that brush heads are up. And we'll get into brush head stuff a little more in a minute. But this is a possible option for brushes. I don't know if it's the best option. It is great for tools. So this is the Wax 9 that I mentioned. I'll zoom in a little. This is actually a smaller size Wax 9. Most of the ones that I've seen are bigger than this. I have one of the bigger ones somewhere else, but I'm not sure it's readily accessible. Smaller is better for us. We are working at a smaller scale than a lot of crafts and hobbies. And then this side is like a smoother side. This is nice for if you're adding putty to something, like you're trying to extend a base. Like where'd my poor guy go? If I were trying to make a base on this, which I never did, I could, use this to kind of mush the putty down and join it in and smooth it to my thing. I have just remembered something I forgot for the tools. If you don't like using your own spit as a lubricant, you will want to include some Vaseline or whatever you do like using as a lubricant. I mean, water can work too a lot of times, so you may want to have a little dish that you can put water in. Oh my gosh, Green User's air conditioner is broken in Arizona. Oh, that sounds bad. And they are reminding you that if you have a favorite tool, bring it. Because if you have a favorite tool, it's your favorite tool because you've been using it, you know how to use it, you're comfortable with it, you definitely want to have that one available if you're taking sculpting classes and trying to practice sculpting in the open hobby area. So this is this company, Royal Sovereign Limited, I believe were the first people to make this. This one was called a color shaper, and these ones with the black tip are called clay shapers. You can get cheap Chinese knockoffs of these now because these cost a bit. So you'll notice that the clay shaper says firm and the clay shaper says extra firm and the color shaper says firm. I think almost all of us prefer the firmer clay shaper. These are, you can sculpt with these. They make different tips, so you can make different shapes. They are very popular with sculpting. They don't stick a lot. I mean, you're still going to need to use like a little spit or something probably, or water. But they're also great for smooth. So there's some really weird tips on these. I have to admit that I never used that one. I think it came in a set. I do not think I've used that one much, but I've used all of these. So like the triangle one, the flat one I use a lot, and the cone one I use a lot. I have some larger ones of these. So this is the smallest size that they make, I think. This is size 0. Again, so many cheap Chinese knockoffs on Amazon now. It blew my mind. The reason I don't have the bigger ones over here is that they also work well for oil pastels. So since I barely use the big ones for sculpting purposes, I transferred those over to my other art area, and that's when I went looking to see if there were more, because bigger ones were going to be better for that. And I was like, holy crap, look how cheap this is now. So these are homemade sculpting tools, and it's possible that the kind sculptors I know made these. This was Jean, actually. But Julie recommends making your own sculpting tools all the time. You get a piece of metal, and this one has been hammered down and then shaped to be like a spoon. It's kind of like where'd that wax 9 go? It's kind of like a really, small version of that. And that is a very useful. Bryce uses all 3 firm. Oh, there's a third firmness. I did not know about that. What's the third firmness, Bryce? Soft, I guess. So it's got a slight curve on the end. That's pretty handy. I use this one a lot too. Kind of, you do like poking things or just getting the putty, and this is often the one I just use to put the putty someplace. I do not use this cutting one as much, but I'm sure that people who actually know how to sculpt probably do use that one more. And then this is a flattened version. It's similar to the other one, but it doesn't curve up. And this is like, if you can get tools this small, this is very nice to use for what we do. But you probably will have to make it yourself. Now, I will say, I haven't done it for a while, but when I first started sculpting, I saw this tip on a web page and it totally worked. So you want both types of toothpicks. So you can get that sandpaper I had, or your files or whatever, and you can file this down to, you can't file it to the round one, but you can file it down to be very similar to this flat one. And then you put a little super glue on it and it strengthens it. And eventually it'll break, but it'll work as a tool for a pretty good while. And then you can file these down to make them, a sharper point. So if you're just getting into sculpting, or you have special sculpting tools like this that you made or a friend made for you and you don't want to risk losing them at a convention, just prep a few toothpicks before you go and bring that. If all you're going to do is sculpt bases or whatever like I do. The other tools I have, I do not know if this company is still around, AMC Creatures, but he does handmade sculpting tools and was selling sets of them on Etsy at one point. So I got a set of those. That's why there's a lot of, once you get beyond like a wax 9 and the ends that I showed you on these things, you're getting into some specialist, these things are super useful too, but you're getting into specialist stuff or like things that are nice to have, but maybe you don't need to have. And then these are the size of tools that you are most commonly going to be able to buy. So a lot of these are probably squadron tools that I got at my local Hobby Town. And they are largely too big for what we do. This pointy type stuff, they're very similar to dental tools, and you can try asking your dentist for them because they wear out. Like dentists need them to be like very sharp. So they wear out for their purposes, but they're still useful for our purposes. So if you are friendly with your dentist, it's worth asking. My dentist already thinks we're like super strange, so I don't think I'm going to broach that with him. We go, so both my husband and I go to the same dentist, and we go at the same time because he can't drive, so I have to take us, so I always get our appointments at the same time. And we told our dentist once about going to like conventions to play board games and stuff, and he just thought this was like the weirdest thing in the world. So he asks us about it like every time we go. So he's into like fishing and stuff. So he thinks we're mental. It's like, no, we have indoor vacations. You can get a lot of these little things like with a ball on the end. Those are not hard to find. This is the handle that goes with the other two tools that I have. I don't know why I decided that one was the one. I have a portable scalpel blade in here. These I actually do use a lot. That's why they look like this. I got them. So my Jerry's Artarama isn't Jerry's Artarama. It's very confusing. But I'm sure Jerry's Artarama and other art stores sell these, and they would sell them in the clay sculpting section. I like these like just to get the putty out of the container and stuff. So I'm not gunking out my real tools, basically, because you want to keep your tools clean, which is the other reason you might want a hobby knife, because you're going to want to scrape off the gunk before it sets. I don't know if you can hear the sad cat trying to get in here telling me how seafood was not what he wanted today. He's very tragic. All right, let's talk about how you protect those brushes. And then I will get on to that. Disposable gloves are useful for sculpting stuff, or if you're doing anything kind of with chemicals. I don't recall if they're doing it this year or if this is the last year they're doing it. Reaper has for many years done this melt bin thing where you can bring in old metal from approved manufacturers and trade it in for credit. If someone remembers whether they've mentioned that they are or are not doing this, I know they've talked about it on reaperlive. I just do not remember the answer. You want to put some gloves on to read through that bin, or you're going to end up with black hands. I'm not saying I haven't just ended up with black hands because I wanted to know what was in there, but I appreciated when I remembered to bring gloves. But if you're doing anything with chemicals as well, like mixing putties, stuff like that, it's useful to have the gloves. If you think you're going to need to spray prime on site, always check with the convention that this is allowed. There may be a particular place where you have to go do it, or it may not be allowed. But if you are getting spray paint all over a hotel, and like even if it's a parking lot or something, the hotel knows which event is there. They know who to blame for that, and they may fine the people running the convention for damage to the hotel. So do not spray prime unless you're allowed to. But if you are allowed to, you're probably going to want to have gloves so that you can hold the miniature and then spray prime. Or, go to some other parking lot or something. Kuniko said, seafood, you monster. The other cat loves seafood, though. I don't know. I thought he ate it. Like, the other day he rejected the salmon, which they go back and forth on salmon. But this was like, I don't know, seafood medley or something. And I thought they were fine with that. Yes, so I will talk about brush solutions and then get back to the other stuff. So zoom out. Well, I'll try here first. So this is what they call a bamboo brush roll. It's kind of like the things that they use to make sushi, but there's a pocket. And in fact, this one has, little sections in the pocket. When I was looking on Amazon, I did not find any that were exactly like this. I found ones that had fabric up the sides. And this is relevant because I will now switch over to the other view. This is not how I bought this. Almost all brush things that you're going to buy are made to also accommodate the long handled brushes. I do not have any of those with me right now. Hold on. I'll just roll back here and get one. So this is a long handled brush. It is for people doing canvas painting. This is the kind of brush we normally use. You can see that there's a lot of wasted space. So if I had this in here, I would have this roll that's up to here, and I didn't need it. So I just chopped it off. I probably could have even chopped it off under here because, you know, this is for those long brushes, this extra elastic thing. But my little brushes have never needed to go anywhere near there. So now that I think about it, but I felt like it was an extra support because it is sewn across there. So I cut it off and I kept these, and you could even use them for hobby purposes like stirring paints, or you could make a Japanese style bridge or something out of it. But you want one where all the parts are bamboo if you're going to cut it across there. If you have to have a longer one, it may work. You're going to have to figure out what your luggage accommodates. I put my brushes in my carry-on, as I mentioned, so there, even though I have an enormous backpack, there are some size limitations that I have had to be conscious of. So you put the brushes in, well, not the giant brush, but you can put sculpting tools in here too, of course. And then you just roll it up. And then you use this little tie thing, and you just, poke it through some of the stuff, and it secures your brushes. I do prefer to put this in my carry-on, and that is partly so I know which end is up. So I'm putting this end where the bristles are facing up, because even if you wrap it really tight, especially once you start getting a few brushes in here, if you tip it over, it is possible that brushes, even if they don't fall all the way out, they might fall to the end and the bristles get bent, and that is what we are trying to avoid. So you want your brushes to be protected, and the bristles are the part that need to be protected. Because, this is what you don't want to have happen. You don't want this happening to your brushes. So anything that is going to apply pressure or smush the end or anything like that, that is what you don't want to have happen. So whatever solution you come up with, that is the problem you're trying to solve. So one answer for that is to keep the little brush protectors that come on brushes. And there are some downsides to that, and I have kept those, and now I can't find them, which is going to be one of your downsides. If you can't find them after you keep them, you don't have them to use. The other problem is that they are different sizes. Different brushes are different diameters around here. This bigger one that I do like to use for, base coating or whatever, you might have even bigger brushes for terrain. I can't use the same brush protectors on both of these. The other problem is you do have to be very careful putting them on, and if I had one, I would show you what happens when you do it wrong. I can't believe I don't have any of those. I just took like 3 of them off brushes. But anyway, it's really easy for you to mess up the brush by having some hairs. Where'd my paper? So if you have some hairs that get trapped on the other side of the brush protector and you're pulling them away from the main body of your bristle, that's going to cause you problems. That's not going to be a nice smooth brush head anymore. So brush protectors do work for some people, but they're not the perfect answer. I know. So Michael and I both like these, the Series 7. He keeps these tubes, and he keeps his brush protectors. If you kept the brush protector in the tube, then you'd know which one goes with which brush, I guess. Maybe you'd have to label it, because I don't think it tells you which brush it is. And he just uses this to bring the cons. I've kept the tubes, but I've never actually used them for that purpose. I prefer other methods, I guess. I'm usually bringing a lot of brushes because I'm trying to bring enough for people in classes in case they forget. So let's look at some other options. So this is cheap. One of the advantages of the bamboo brush roll is it is an inexpensive option. If you don't travel a lot and you don't want to spend a lot of money on that. This actually is a pencil case, and I'm sure there are plastic ones as well. I bought this for my stylus for my iPad. So that's why it's got this thing here, just to protect the tip. And it's metal, so it'll stick to the magnet of in the case a little bit. But let's say I just had this and I wanted to use it for brushes. That putty that we had, that awesome putty that I've now lost again. I have more. You can never have enough putty. All right, we're going to use the old school white putty, but it's the same idea. Nope, there's some blue. You can kind of make your own little brush holder with this. So you get this stuff, put it down there. You might even do, let's do a top and a bottom one. And then you squeeze your brush handle down on that stuff. And you have immobilized it. Oops. Well, okay, the brush doesn't fit in there. That's weird because I thought I tested. The brush doesn't fit in this one, but you can find pencil cases like this that a brush would fit in. Bring a brush with you to the store if you're looking during, back to school season at pencil cases. So there, it works with that one. This is just my mixing brush, so it doesn't matter anyway. So, it's pretty sturdy. Price, I use the pencil holders with the brush tips. Pencil holders with the brush tips. Oh, is this like no. Oh, you use like a pencil case with like the elastics or the sleeves or the like little pockets, and you put your brush tips on it. So like the thing that I had for the sculpting tools, but then you put your brush tips on. Is that what you mean? Something like that? And you can get different sizes of container that you can do this blue tack trick with. You could even, that's something you could do with the inside of your lid on your wet palette. I would take the sponge out if I did that. But you could blue tack them in there. So those are options. There is kind of like a store-bought version of that. And the company that I know makes them is Art Bin, but this is another one of those things that I saw plenty of Chinese knockoffs of the last time I went on Amazon. But interestingly, I couldn't find the Art Bin in this size, but I'm virtually confident that this is an Art Bin. Well, now I'm looking at it. It doesn't say Art Bin. All right, well, this has personal information on it, so I'm just gonna, because I wrote on all my stuff with a Sharpie when I was going to some cons. So that's Art Bin is this company. I'm going to open the lid now, and we'll look at how it works inside. Well, you can't see my personal information, hopefully. So it has these foam things with slots, and you put the brushes in the slots. I even double stack them, as you see here. I bought this for like paint and take and stuff, so I had to put like a lot of brushes in here. You can eventually stretch this out if you have wider diameter brushes, especially if you're doing this double stacking thing, because I have another one of these now for my watercolor brushes, and some of those handles are like really thick. You can put the brushes in the other orientation too if you need to. But you do want to check before you travel that nothing's, too close to the edge. And maybe even check, once you land, it hasn't been jostled in there. Because if you do smush a brush, it's not like the end of the world and you can never recover it. If you get it fairly quickly, there are, you can use brush soap or shampoo or conditioner and time to eventually coax it back to not being a half moon. So this stuff, and now that I'm looking at it, this must have been some kind of knockoff, because this foam is different, and it was not as attached as well. So this is how they attached it, probably with like a glue gun or something. This is my double-sided mounting tape again. So when it fell out, I just stuck it back in with foam. So this is another option if you can find a case like this, and there are plenty of Art Bin ones or similar that you can buy that don't have the foam in them, that they intend for like pencils and other art tools, although many of those also need to protect the tips, so I don't completely understand the logic. And you have some foam maybe left over from blister packs or something, you can do the home version of this, or you can use the blue tack the same way if you have some kind of thing like this. So this is the one I prefer to take on plane trips because it's a bit smaller. But so this is more than 12 inches long, I think. it is shorter. No, okay, it does still accommodate the long handle brushes because it's so hard to find something that isn't made also for the long handle brushes. So my backpack, I kind of have to put it in diagonal, but it does fit. But that's, you know, it's hard-sided. I still don't know that I'd feel comfortable with this in my check luggage just because, you know, how they throw things around. So even if they aren't looking at it and putting the things back in wrong, the chance that an impact is going to knock one of them out and then the tip is smushed seems pretty high to me. I guess you could double protect by holding down the handles with the blue tack. But the brushes are my preciouses, so they fly on the plane with me. What? Oh, I'll put that away later. What else have we got? There are different styles of this. I did try buying one that was specifically made for brushes once, and I guess I just didn't pick very well because I found that when you put the two sides together, the brushes on this side would sometimes mess with the brushes on the other side. And I mean, I think I tested it on brushes I didn't care about, but it didn't do very well, so I never used that one. There's some neat ones that they make now. They're going to be the long-handled side, so they're going to be, you know, out to here instead of down here. But they fold like this, but then they also turn into like a stand. So you can flip one half of it down and then the brushes are sticking up so you can just easy access grab them. So that can even be handy for home use if you think you like the sound of that. But again, it's probably something that's a little more designed for people who are painting canvases and larger things than we paint. Bryce agrees with me. Brushes never, ever, ever go in chuck luggage. Yeah, like I can't. No, not even like ratty old class brushes or things that I'm bringing. Because I used to teach a class, particularly when Bones first came out, and I had written all those Bones articles. I would do some Bones classes. So we were doing dry brushing and washing, and I had a bunch of ratty old flat brushes in case people needed them for dry brushing. I don't even think I'd want to put those in my check luggage. I do not trust TSA. I do not. I mean, I'm not saying I think TSA is horrible or whatever, but I don't trust them to understand how you take care of a brush. If they have to inspect my luggage and they pull stuff out, I wouldn't be confident that they would put it back the right way. And also, just the way luggage gets banged around, I would need one heck of a Fort Knox brush holding solution to be confident that it wouldn't knock the brushes out of the way. All right, so we talked a bit about, you know, sculpting putties, glues, and other chemicals. Again, if you are mostly a painter, unless a class tells you to bring stuff like this and you're trying not to be an overpacker, don't bring stuff like this. And many of these things cannot be permitted on the plane. Again, for those who came in halfway, the site where you can check is TSA. Hold on, where did I put it? TSA's. Can it fly or something? Now I'm forgetting. Hold on. TSA, what can I bring? Do a web search for TSA, what can I bring? They have a searchable list. I mean, you can also just read like all the stuff on the list if you want. But flammable is a keyword on your item that means no, you cannot bring it. Basing and terrain supplies. So I showed you that I had some stuff that I might make bases with. I think Michael Proctor almost always brings like a few base things because if he's asked to paint a miniature while we're visiting Reaper, he's gonna want to put a Michael Proctor base on it, even if it's like, you know, the minimum level of Michael Proctor base. So he'll bring a bit of, you know, cork or, well, not cork, he likes bark, and he does most of the rest of it with putty, but he might have some like scatter or flock or stuff like that. Again, if you are not making a terrain board and you don't like making fancy bases and you haven't told a friend that you're going to bring this stuff and show them how to use it, you mostly just want to paint, do not feel like you have to bring that stuff. But if it's the part of the hobby that you're into and you want to bring it, then think about, you know, what you are most likely to use and have the room for. And you probably want to, you know, you can get little baggies from like the jewelry section of your hobby store. So there's even smaller than sandwich bags. It'll be like 2x3 or 2x4 inches, and you can put just a little bit of, you know, static grass and flock and gravel and whatever in there, so that you don't have to have like your giant bottles of those things with you. Nomad Zeke recommends that you should not be the reason they have to add anything to the cannot bring list, and that seems like very solid advice. Lord Dave uses one of those brush holders that turns into a stand. And do you like that, Lord Dave? That's what you use at home and you find that useful? If you're not able to have a permanent hobby area out, that's probably a really good option for storing your brushes and then setting up to paint really quick. Bryce Coconor, you cannot take any type of drill bit. They didn't let me bring drill bits even though they were smaller than a sewing needle. In check luggage or in carry-on? Yeah, I don't even bring anything other than a nail clipper in carry-on at this point. Like not even a metal nail file. I'll bring emery boards for filing my nails, and then so all I have is that little nail file thing that you get on a nail clipper. And pencils. You know, I mean, probably my mechanical pencil is more dangerous than Bryce Coconor's drill bits, but, you know, don't point that out to TSA. I love my mechanical pencils. And then personal preference. Think about is there anything you use that's specific to you that is not common that I might not have remembered? And Bryce is confirming that it was carry-on for the drill bits. So if you've been watching the show, you know I like to use a sponge like this to wick my brush instead of paper towel. And I like it so much that if I'm going to be painting somewhere, I will be very uncomfortable if I have to use paper towel for hours. So I bring my little sponge. I put it in a baggie, little sandwich bag, and my sponge comes with me. I mean, if it's dry, that's fine. I can wet it when I'm there. It doesn't have to be moist for the trip, but I like my sponge. So I think that is all of the stuff that I wrote down. Yes, Bryce uses them to pin minis. If you have a pin vise, you're going to have drill bits. So that's another carry-on item. Pretty much any tools that you're going to use. That anything more threatening looking than a pencil or a nail clipper is more safely put in your check luggage. Now I have had this kind of putty, like the poster tack. I have all kinds of that in my carry-on because I put it. That's what most of us use in our miniature cases to secure the miniatures. And I get swabbed down a lot. And I mean, they will open your miniature case and swab inside and make sure that this isn't bombs or drugs, I guess. So be prepared for that. But I do find it interesting that more and more TSA agents, like I don't know if a lot of them are in the hobby too, but they either know exactly what they are, or they at least recognize that it's artwork and it's fragile and they treat it with a little bit of care. But I'm not going to tell you any of the flight horror stories. I haven't had much happen to me personally. If you want flight or horror stories, Greg Zuniga is the man to talk to. I don't know why he keeps getting hit, but he's had carry-on and miniature case issues with TSA. No, not carry-on. He's had check luggage. They opened up his weathering powders and didn't close them up correctly, and then that was all over his luggage. But yes, so I think I talked about double bagging and bagging. Like, just put anything in a bag if you're worried that it could mess up your clothing or the other stuff that you are bringing with you. And I will so I have this little Ziploc, and I kind of keep this is kind of ready to go for conventions, although I was looking through it before the show and feeling like maybe I need to go through it. Like maybe it's gotten a little bit overpacked, but this is kind of, I just have this ready to go. Like this isn't even, I don't use this stuff at home. Like this is really just for conventions. So I have my spare files, some of those blister packs for making wash cups. If you do bring, Lord Dade says, if you do bring drill bits, just write a note that says Bryce Coconor said I could bring these. And then this is stuff I bring to conventions, not just miniature ones, but in general, like if I'm going to a board game convention or whatever. A Sharpie, Post-it notes. I don't have any Post-it notes in here. I'm going to have to add them. Or scrap pieces of paper and tape. If you said, I'm going to meet you here, and then you can't, or... so there are various reasons why you might end up needing to make a sign or a Post-it note, or you want to get someone's autograph. It's never a bad thing to have a Sharpie. And Ed gave this to me because I was so amazed. Actually, I think the one Ed gave me finally dried out, but he had one of these and I was like, oh my God, it's magic because it's a retractable Sharpie. It is magic. You don't have to have a cap. How did they do it? And you can kind of tell how they did it if you look at it. But That is very handy. But if you like getting autographs, you might want to get fancy Sharpies and get like, they make metallic ones that are like bronze, silver, and gold. I have, I always bring an extra miniature holder. This might actually have been that Michael packed up and left before I did, and he left that behind, and that's why I have that in there, because this does not look like my usual thing that I bring. Oh, here's something I forgot with the painting supplies, and I meant to mention. And this is another thing, if you're an overpacker, don't feel like you need to have this. But so the Masters brush cleaner people, this is the usual size. They also make it in a oh my god size, and I bought that once for $12 because it was on sale, and now I have all the brush cleaner I will ever need for the rest of my life. So that's the regular size. You can see how much smaller. This isn't, I wouldn't say it's a quarter, but it's maybe like a dollar coin big. And it's light because, you know. Now, you pay, you know how it is when you buy small things, your price per ounce is ridiculous. So the price per ounce of the stuff is ridiculous compared to buying it this way. But if you travel enough and you like to make sure you can clean your brushes, this is handy. I often will just wait until I get home and just give them all like a really thorough cleaning. But if you prefer to be able to clean your brushes immediately, or you're worried that you're going to loan, you know, you're bringing a kid with you and they're maybe not so great about rinsing their brush out after, and you want to be able to get the paint out, that's a useful thing to have. Scotch tape. So also when you're at ReaperCon, if you're missing something, I'm one of the people you can come ask if I have the thing. I will not have super glue, but I will apparently have quite a number of other things. If you have a commission service or a stream or a blog or anything else, and you have cards or you want to make cards, bring some of these. Or blank pieces of paper, so that if you meet someone really cool, and you're gonna meet someone really cool at a convention, you can write down their email address or their website or whatever and have that with you later. Because sometimes, you know, it's just going to take too long to get out your phone, or your, I don't know, maybe I'm just old. If you're young, maybe all you need is your phone. But, oh, see, I do have the autograph thing, which usually I just end up loaning to Izzy so that she can give autographs to people. Bryce says the Sharpie so we can get autographs from Rhonda. Fanboy talking here. Well, thank you, Bryce. I hope you enjoy completely illegible autographs. Actually, when I do sign things, which is rare, but I think there was a couple of years that I just went in the Reaper store and signed the Learn to Paint kits they had there just for fun. I write my name so you can read it, not my actual signature, because my actual signature is a nightmare. This is thing that I'm completely forgetting the noun for at this point. You know, you like dip it in something and you squeeze it and the suction. Somebody help me. You're all laughing. Anyway, these can be useful, and it's plastic and it's super light, and I had some extra, so I just threw it in there. Again, overpacking people, not something you need. If you are bringing this kind of tape, instead of like preloading your brush handles, you will need something to cut it with. You probably could use a hobby knife if you're using it, if you bring in one anyway. I bought a set of scissors that had these like little kid style scissors in it, and that seemed perfect to just throw in my convention bag for the reasons I need scissors. And that is one of those things I end up loaning out to people. And this is what I meant about where I save, you know, when I get down to the end, I save it, and then I just stick extra strips on it and bring it with me. What else is here? So these are, I mentioned that I put rubber bands around the pencil boxes that I often store my miniatures in. I bring extra rubber bands because they can break and stretch. And I clearly haven't been eating enough asparagus because these rubber bands are all old. All the purple ones come from asparagus. I do not know why the grocery store. Is that at your grocery store that you always have purple rubber bands on the asparagus? But clearly I have to go eat a bunch more asparagus because I've run out of rubber bands. This is a very specific kind of tape that I make my own. You know, they make those nasal strips. I make my own at home, and I use these. But this stuff also, you can stick it and re-stick it to bubble wrap, where Scotch tape will just rip bubble wrap out. So I make these like little bubble wrap mummy tubes for my miniatures that I can store in the pencil cases. And I just bring extra of this in case I need to, you know, the tape stops working, or I have some extra ones. And I always bring extra bubble wrap in case I buy a resin miniature or a friend gives me something and it's fragile and I need to put it in there. Oh, here's your classic Wax 5. It is, so here's a comparison with some small files. It is bigger than we want it to be for sculpting gaming scale miniatures. But I think I actually mostly have this to pop the tape off. I use the flat blade to pop the tape off because sometimes the tape sticks too well. I have extra of the glue tack, which I put in an additional baggie so that it doesn't stick to all these other things. Last year at ReaperCon, they gave us these cool folding, I guess like little mini whiteboards so we could write, you know, gone to lunch or whatever. And I kept the pens from that in case they do that again. I don't know, because I'm compulsive. Why do I have 2 of them even? I probably took Michael's again. Hey, Lethal Shadows Gaming. We're talking about packing for conventions today. We're actually kind of finishing up. And there are my Pokey tools, safely protected in the Kids Fun Foam. So that's kind of my, I always have it with me bag, so I don't even have to think about these things because I have enough extra, you know, T-pins and Sharpies and whatnot that I can. But I do see that I'm missing the Post-it note that should be in there in case I want to get somebody's email address and whatnot. Where are we time-wise? Oh, just about right on time. But now I'm going to check and see if Ron said I'm allowed to show you guys things as soon as I figure out what I did with my phone. Wow, what is Ron busy with today? Because he has not replied. Well, you know what? I swear he said it was okay, so we're going to do it. I'm not going to, I mean, it's too late. I'm not going to get to show it in action, but I'll show you some miniatures. And I think I'm going to have to bump the light up again. So these are some miniatures that I've been painting with something a little different than the usual paint. Let me find my bottles here. You can tell that they're prototypes, and I was instructed to be very clear that these are prototypes because there are no labels. So these are like hand-poured batches that I'm sure other people have been giving these to test, or they're testing them around the Reaper factory. So I don't have a lot of colors. I have your primaries, green and black. Maybe I could show them just for a minute. But either we'll be looking at this more next week or the week after that. Because like I mentioned, I want to talk about paints to bring to a convention. And while these are maybe paints that you want to bring to a convention. So the one thing about these is they do, it does fall out of suspension a fair bit. So I'm going to real quick just do the noisy thing. All right, where's my test subject? I'm not sure blue is his color, but so I'm gonna do the green instead. Now I'm not mixing and messing with these. Well, I can mix a little. All right, so there is some stuff. I'll do just a little bit of red. Because as we may have, I think we discussed this. That's the show I forgot. We did talk about Christmas in July. Or more specifically, how not to paint Christmas when you don't want to. So how do you harness the power of the red-green color complementary without making anyone think of Christmas? And right now, this looks very Christmas. And one of the ways you do that, so you can go back and watch that show. Do I know what episode it is? No, but it is on the Reaper YouTube channel now. So if I take a little bit of this red and I mix it in with the green, I'm going to start to dull it down. Now, these are actually such pure colors that it's not going to go khaki for me, unfortunately. But it will at least dull it down a little bit. So he's not going to be, you know, totally grass green orc. Because, you know, if you've been watching the show, you know I like to paint the skin, you know, non-human skin tones in the same kind of way that I would paint human skin tones. So where they call us, you know, brown and red and yellow and whatnot, we're all just, you know, shades of tan and pink and orange. I mean, we're desaturated versions of all of those colors. So let's just throw some paint on this guy. And I'm super old is why I'm wearing the magnifier. Is he in focus? No, he's probably not. So these are called super washes. I have the other Reaper washes with me. There's not going to be time to compare today, but in the future, when I do this in more detail, or more, more thoroughly, we will compare, do a comparison with the Reaper washes. So let's try it on some of these big burly muscles that this guy's got going on. And I'll just do the front for now. So that is something to look forward to, knowing more about. And as I say, I only have, I have 5 colors that I'm pretty sure are the colors or close to the colors that they are actually working on. And then I have a brown bottle that no one can figure out where it came from, or if it seems similar, but it's way more opaque. So I was using this at first, and Ron's like, why are you telling me that the black is too thick? And what do you, I'm like, I don't have black, I have brown. He's like, no, you don't. I'm like, I have brown. So I had to paint it out for him. And he's like, okay, I have no idea how that happened. And then later he sent me the black. But it is a very blue black, so it will also mix very pure colors. These ones at least, and I'm told there will probably be some browns, which is what we need to be able to solve the colors are too pure problem. Mix very pure colors. Like if I mix the red and the yellow, you will see what a lovely orange you get. Okay, gotta mix that more. So they're very easy to mix together. And I've been having a grand old time doing that. Testing those. So you get a nice flame orange. But then it's kind of hard to make it into, say I want a less saturated orange. That is the challenge right now with the color set that I have. But I'm sure that with a more complete set, that will be less of a challenge. But I will just show a couple more figures that I've done. And I've been experimenting with different things, like with zenithal priming, and let's see, who's a zenithal prime dude? This guy was zenithal primed. That I happen to have them lying around. I've since zenithal primed some more guys, but I haven't gotten around to testing them yet. And I mixed the purple, because I don't have a purple, so that's just the blue and the red. And I actually mixed the black because I didn't have the black then, and it's really easy to mix nice blacks with it, which sounds weird if you're not used to color mixing. A lot of painters, like canvas painters, mix their own blacks rather than use black out of the bottle. And that's the green. And then this one, what I experimented with is I painted all of the robe green and then just went over the edges with the blue. So I did not physically mix those two colors. They're visually mixed on the figure. And I was working on figuring out how to... So I have some color mixing knowledge now, so I did figure out how to mix like tans and skin colors and stuff like that, but it was not the work of a moment. So, but once there's a few more colors, I will be able to explain to people how to do it more easily. So then it was easy to make a dull down blue. A little orange, a little black. And then I painted the metal areas metal and then went over with the stuff. And I think I added a little extra shading here and there on him. So if you're willing to do a little more, like this is just kind of, straight out of the bottle, zenithal, straight out of the bottle. And actually, I do mean straight out of the bottle. These are original bendy bones. You can see from the white bottom. And I did not do anything to this. I washed it and I applied this paint directly. So if you have a big old stack of white bones, you will be able to apply this stuff directly to it. You will not need to prime white or brush paint white. This one I applied black wash to. I was trying to experiment with, like, could you get some additional shading? So you can see that it worked here. It didn't really work on these deep folds. This is the kind of, this kind of approach works better on some types of shapes and sculpted surfaces than others. So this has a lot of horizontal folds. There's lots for the paint to pool in. This has a lot of vertical stuff, and the slopes are much more steep, so the paint isn't going to stick in there as well. Then this guy, I think I also used the black wash on him, and it worked better because of the shapes. You know, it was just little folds instead, so those are darker. And then it's like there's more lining around some of the parts on his coat. So I did mix some highlights with this, so it's the same paints, and I just added a little white and mix some highlights. So, and not a lot, like just a little bit on his pants and his hair and the shirt. So it's like anything, if you're willing to put in a little more time and effort, you get more out of it. This one, I know I dry brushed the skeleton part over because I think that the initial coverage was so dark that I had to do something. So that brought the skeleton back, but the rest of it, I don't think I dry brushed anything additional onto. The angel shows, and I'll talk about this more when I'm painting for real. So this is the thinned down real black, because by this time I had the real black and not the ones I was making up. And even thinning it down a lot, which I don't know if they're planning to use a thinner. I've been using brush on sealer as a thinner, and it seems to work pretty well. But even thinning it down a lot, it's black in the crevices. Whereas if I add a little white, and I would probably add even more white for this particular function, you're going to get a different, softer look. So some things you can make it lighter just by adding more medium, by, you know, diluting the pigment. But sometimes you're going to get a different look by adding white than you will get by doing that. Also, this miniature, I should note, was gray. You can see the color gray that it was. This was a class miniature, so I painted them gray for everybody because we were doing dry brushing, so I wanted them to be able to. This is also original Bendy Bones. And then I dry brushed it white. And I don't feel like that really did anything. I mean, before I put any stuff on it. So it was gray. I dry brushed it white in an attempt to kind of make some areas lighter. So sort of a different way of doing a zenithal prime. And I'm not convinced that that had much of an effect at all, really. So I don't know if that was worth the time, but I mean, it wouldn't have looked any good over the gray, but I'm saying I'm not sure it's any different compared to just going directly over white. This is a metal figure. It's actually a dark sword figure. I haven't done the metallic parts yet because I was figuring I'd do real metallics and then go over it. And it was primed white, of course. Worked fine on that. Now this one, I did some extra shading on the hair. I think I did a little extra shading on her shirt, which was partly just me not being completely happy with the color more than... I did 2 coats on the boots, so that was the green plus the black, and it made a really nice color, but it just wasn't intense enough to make them look as dark as I wanted. And then this one, I did a little extra shading on a few parts, but that's the black straight up on her boots. Well, and I went through like 3 versions of her hair color. I'm just nutsy about hair, so that's how that was. But anyway, so that's a little preview. We'll check in on this guy. He's not 100% dry, so there's definitely still a lot of moisture in the crevices. What I found I enjoyed doing with these is I was working on multiple ones at the same time. So that's why you'll see some of them have similar colors, because it's like, well, I already had that mix. I might as well just use it over here in this other one. And if you're trying to paint quickly anyway, that's very efficient. So that is your preview. Then I'm not even sure they've talked about this on Reaper Live yet. I don't know that I've ever gotten to break a story before. So I hope you enjoyed the show. If you came a little later and you're packing up for Gen Con next week, or ReaperCon, or Nova over Labor Day, and you want some tips for packing, that's what I talked about. So you might want to watch the VOD after we finish streaming. And I'm also going to be writing up a blog post, and I'll put some links to, I'll try to find some of those brush holders and stuff like that, and give you some links so you can check them out if you want. And I'm going to let Queenie find us a raid so that you can continue enjoying some hobby fun. And thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. So, have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you next week, or maybe even in person at ReaperCon. But, we're raiding Sky Daddy, so I'll see you later. Thank you.